This is how you hold a sword or a hammer or a toilet bowl plunger. This is how you hold a chef's knife. At this point, there are probably a couple million videos out there on how to properly hold a chef's knife. The problem is that learning how to hold a chef's knife is only a fraction of what you need to know before you can start slicing and dicing. But if that's all you're here for, real quick, let's do it. Ready? What you want to do is pinch the very base of the blade, let your other 3 fingers wrap around. That's it. That's how you hold a chef's knife. Now, some videos out there might take it a step further and show you the claw, which is what you're supposed to do with your guide hand or your non-dominant hand, which is basically where you position your hand like you're grabbing something with claws on your cutting board, with your fingers angled downward away from the blade, your thumb tucked back here, and then this flat area on the face of your generally middle finger is basically what guides the knife. And wherever your claw goes, the knife is going to go. And if you learn that, that's awesome. It is a great start, but it's only a fraction of what you need to know, because holding your knife is one thing, but using it is another. But the problem is that these overly simplified explanations, they basically just share with you what to do with your hands. They don't set you up to have a safe, successful, and a pleasant experience prepping in your kitchen, because they omit a lot of details. Some are big, some are nuanced, but they're things that you need to know so that you can become confident when using a chef's knife in your kitchen. So in this video, I'm going to share with you a combination of techniques that I was taught in culinary school, along with things that I learned over the last 20 or so years since I really got into cooking and since I started collecting knives. However, I'm not here to teach you how to small dice an onion or what the difference is between a julienne and a brunoise. Instead, I'm going to teach you the things that you need to know so that when you finally do start small dicing an onion, you're not in a cart before the horse type of situation. Anyway, I'm Chef Brandon with Cutlery and More, and my goal in this video is to help you use fewer Band-Aids, so let's begin. First, let's talk about your knife. Now, in the title of this video, it says chef's knife, but the reality is many of you could have different types of knives, and everything that I'm going to explain here is still relevant to them. So whether you have a 10-inch Zwilling, you've got an 8-inch Wusthof, a Japanese chef's knife, or a Gyuto. Some of you may have a hybrid, which is like a German-Japanese chef's knife that has the best of both worlds. Heck, some of you might even have a bunka, a nakiri, or a santoku, or a very small chef's knife. Either way, everything I'm going to share here applies to all of these different styles of knives, and I'm going to use a couple of them throughout the video so that you can see them in action. Here's the thing. It doesn't matter what style of knife you have, if it's 6 inches or 10 inches, a santoku or a hybrid, what matters is that it is sharp. Now, I know on social media, and there's all these videos out there of people cutting paper to demonstrate how sharp their knife is, but the thing is I've never once cut up paper on my cutting board for prepping food, but I have cut up plenty of tomatoes and even bell peppers, which are kind of the nemesis of knives, and it will quickly show you if your knife is dull. So if your knife cannot do this and easily slice a tomato, it's definitely a dull knife. Now, a lot of people think that a dull knife is better to get started with because if they slip, they won't cut themselves. Well, a dull knife will still cut you. It might not cut a tomato, but it can still cut you. And generally, it's not a very clean cut, so it can hurt more and it'll take longer to heal. The cool thing about a sharp knife is it goes where you want it to go. A lot of people, what happens is they'll have a dull knife, they'll come into a product, it won't go through, it moves, next thing you know, it's into their fingers. So as long as you have a sharp knife and you follow the basic techniques and little methods that I'm gonna share with you today, then you're gonna be totally fine. But if you do cut yourself, listen, it still happens. I still cut myself sometimes. It just comes with knives. It is what it is. Next up, I want to share a couple safety tips so that you can be mindful of these things as you're getting more comfortable with your knives. One of the most important things to protect yourself is never, ever, ever try and catch a falling knife. I'm telling you, it is a game that you will lose. About 10 years ago, my now wife, girlfriend at the time, went and grabbed a plate that had a knife on it, and the knife started sliding. She tried catching the knife. Well, she got herself a trip to the emergency room and 3 stitches. The knife won that game. So whether the knife falls off your cutting board, someone else drops one, or it slides off your cutting board or your plate or anything like that, just leave it be. I promise you, the knife can always be fixed. And another thing to keep in mind when it comes to a falling knife is if you have closed toe shoes on, chances are you're not going to lose one of your piggies if the knife lands on your foot. Now with that, don't do one of these things where you try and pick up your board with your knife on it. Leave it be. Do one at a time. And if you see a knife on a plate, just pick up the knife first and move it. So basically think of it as every time you move a knife, just move the knife and come back for anything else. Speaking of moving the knife, whenever you are walking with a knife, the position the knife should be in is down by your side. Don't do one of these things where you're at your board and you turn like this to the kitchen sink or to the stove and, well, you know what could happen. Now, pointing your knife down like this isn't great either if you have dogs and little kids running around. So this is what you do. Before you position your knife downwards, look around. Make sure there's no dogs at your feet looking for scraps. Make sure the kids aren't running around. Then you can make sure your area is clear, put the knife down to your side and walk it over to the sink or wherever you need to transport it. Next up is your prep station. And the reason this is so important is because there's really no point in learning how to hold a chef's knife if you don't have the proper area to use it in. Your workflow and how you move product around, where you put your knife, all these things really matter. Your cutting board. We highly recommend a hardwood cutting board, not bamboo because it's too hard, or a plastic cutting board like this will do just fine. Size matters. This little guy here is a great little cutting board, but it's intended for slicing up a lemon wedge for your cocktail or maybe a couple slices of tomato for your sandwich. This is not where you're going to prep an entire meal on. So in the sense of size, I have a variety here. I would highly recommend not going any smaller than these right here, which are basically about 12 by 18. This is a decent size that will fit most knives. Now, if you want to go a little bit bigger, you're going to get into a higher price range, but you're also going to get into, generally speaking, a heavier board like this one here. I use this a lot for everyday prep. It is just big enough to be somewhat of a pain to clean sometimes, but it's also a great just overall size. This is kind of the best of both worlds because it is two-sided like the other ones I showed you there. It's a bit bigger, you get more surface area because it is rectangular, and it's super lightweight. You can see I'm just throwing this thing around. And then we get to the big kahunas here. You can see that this one is only about an inch or so deep, but it is 24 by 18. This is a massive size cutting board, but because it's thin, it's really lightweight to move around. Now, the problem that some people have with these larger boards is that if you have a 2-bay sink, which each one is about yay big, these are near impossible to clean and just a pain, so stick with one that's a little bit smaller. The last two I have here are about the same size of that in that 18 by 24 range, but they are also 1.5 inches to 2 inches thick. They're very heavy. Listen, these things are a project to clean sometimes, even in a wider sink because of how heavy they are, but I just kind of found a groove. I know what works, but when it comes to prepping on these, it is just amazing. So cutting board size matters. Go based on your budget, go based off of the size of your sink, as well as based off of the size of your knife. If you're working with a 10-inch chef's knife, you might want to have a little bit larger of a cutting board. A quick tip when it comes to stabilizing your cutting board. You don't want this moving around as you're working with it. A lot of cutting boards have little rubber feet on the bottom, which is fine, but you can only use one side. But if you have a cutting board that's moving around, you can put a damp towel underneath, or you can take a couple layers of paper towel quickly under the water in the sink, put them underneath. The other thing you can do is roll out some plastic wrap and do about 4 layers, put it underneath in the center, press it down, and that will also stabilize your cutting board. Okay, the next thing that you need at your workstation would be your ingredients and your prep containers. What I like to do is make sure that all of my ingredients are washed and cleaned and ready to be cut. And I like to put them in the container or containers that they will eventually go in for my mise en place, which means everything in its place. It is a French term, and it basically means you are staying organized. You know where everything is at. You're clean, you're tidy, and you're ready to go. I also like to have a discard bowl at my prep station so I can put the onion peel, seeds, the core of an apple, anything that I am not going to be cooking with can go right in there, or you can have a trash can that is right next to you. And the last thing you need at your prep station would be some towels. I like to have separate towels. A towel for wiping, a towel for my knives, a towel for drying my clean hands. Now, as you can see to my right here, I have a towel down with a bunch of my knives. If I'm prepping with 2 or 3 knives or anything more than 1, I generally have a towel that's folded up that they will fit on, that keeps it off to the side, and it stabilizes the knives. If I'm working with just 1 knife, generally I'm keeping it to the right side of my cutting board, or depending on the situation, I will keep it off to the side as well. Okay, we made it. We are finally at the point where we're going to learn how to properly hold a chef's knife. Okay, I'm going to use my very first chef's knife, which is the 10-inch Zwilling Pro. This is an amazing knife I've had for, I don't know, 15 years at this point, and it has served me very well. Now, a lot of you might think it's crazy to have a 10-inch chef's knife as your first knife, but I gotta tell you, if you can learn how to use a knife this big, it makes everything else so much easier. And at times, you'll miss having a big blade because of the amount of things you can do with it. So let's dive in. You can see already just how I picked it up. I immediately went into my pinch grip. So this is how you grip your chef's knife. With your thumb and your pointer finger, you are going to pinch the very base of the blade of the knife, okay? Then your other 3 fingers are going to wrap around. This gives you the most control. It also provides you with the best balance when it comes to most knives. But keep in mind that a knife does not have to be perfectly balanced in the center here. Every knife is going to vary, and it depends on your personal preference as well. This is how you hold a sword or a hammer or a toilet bowl plunger. This is how you hold a chef's knife. Now, there is an exception to the rule. You will see a lot of people on social media as well as on cooking shows put their pointer finger out like this to hold the knife. The reality is, in a normal tap chop, push chop, rock chop, slicing type of position where your knife is straight up and down on the cutting board, this actually, you lose stability with the knife. The pinch grip with the other 3 is going to give you the most amount of control. Now, there are a lot of people that have phenomenal knife skills with their finger out like that because it's just how they learned. But if you're new to a knife, please, I encourage you, pinch, let the other 3 wrap around. Where you will see this type of technique done is where the knife is coming at an angle. If it's off the cutting board, you'll see a lot of sushi preparation because of the way it's cut. Or you'll see people that are, say, breaking down a chicken or trimming meat where they're putting the knife at a different angle other than up and down. And you'll see people having their finger here because they're using that to provide different type of leverage or force or more stability because they're not in this type of position and motion. But again, if you're new to knives, pinch the base, the other 3 wrap around, you'll be good to go. We'll switch it up here to the Mac. This is a hybrid German type of handle with a Japanese blade with the hollows on the side, which minimize sticking of really wet product like an apple or a tomato. Now, once you have your knife properly gripped, then you need to consider your guide hand, which is your non-dominant hand. We're going back to the claw from the very beginning of the video. You want to make this claw cat type of scratch position with this hand, and it's going to come down on the cutting board so your middle finger is parallel to the back of the cutting board or perpendicular to the side. And then what's going to happen is that your knife is going to come right up against the flat spot here between your two knuckles. And this is your guide hand, but even more importantly, your guide finger. But there's a couple other things to this. Notice my thumb way back here, okay? My thumb is going to be supporting the product that I'm cutting like this. You can see I've got that claw and my thumb would be back here supporting that. If it's flatter and it's right on the cutting board, this is even easier, but you can see that claw type of position with my guide finger right there that is basically aiming the blade where it needs to go. The other thing that's super important with this claw, it's not a open hand, it is a claw. Notice how each of my 4, sometimes 3, depends on my pinky here, it's a little bit shorter, but these are the 3 that get closer to the blade. All of my fingernails and fingertips are angled almost on a 45-degree angle like this away from the knife. There's no fingertips sticking out that could catch the edge of my very, very sharp knives. I tell you, I've done it many times, learning how to use my knives and getting used to even new knives, sometimes not paying attention, which is generally what happens. This position needs to be ingrained into your brain so it becomes muscle memory. Now, some of you may have noticed the way I'm standing. I'm facing this way, even though you and the camera are over here. I'm basically standing at a 45-degree angle to my cutting board. And the reason why is because when I go to position and work with my blade, look at my arm and the knife are totally straight. My knife is straight along the cutting board here, which can actually serve as a great guide for when you're trying to make sure you have straight cuts and you just have that point of reference. And then when my other hand comes along here, I'm not at a weird angle. I'm just at this like perfect little harmonious position of knife cutting. So to make this happen, all you got to do is pull your dominant foot. So I'm right-handed, my right foot comes back about 45 degrees. And now when I put my knife on the cutting board, it is parallel. My arm is totally straight, pretty much all the way up into my shoulder. And then this hand comes in naturally to guide my knife. Now, in addition to standing properly, you also need to position yourself on your cutting board appropriately. I am right-handed, so generally I have my product just off center on the right side of my board. So my hand is pretty much dead center, but where I'm cutting generally begins a little bit off to the right here so that I can then come back into the product that I'm working with instead of starting here and doing this. And now look, I'm getting crooked. My back is being bent weird. It's uncomfortable. So you lean in a little bit and now I can go down the product and I don't have to reposition my body. It's easier to reposition the product. Now let's talk about the flow of your ingredients. We're going to do a push chop, something very simple, which I'm going to talk about more in a minute, of this mushroom. I'm in my position. My hand is pretty much centered. The product is just off to the right. My elbow and everything is aligned with the side of the cutting board. And I'm just going to come in here and I'm going to do a very slow push chop. Notice my fingers are backing up, but they're not out like this. Now, I just got done cutting this product. What am I gonna do with it? Well, I've got more mushrooms to cut up, so I don't wanna put my knife down or move these into the bowl quite yet. So what I like to do, you can use the back of the spine to push your product off to the side, and then you reload. Now, I know I have quite a few mushrooms to work with here, so what I like to do is have my ready-to-go product on the left side. I'm cutting in the center, and then I'm moving my finished product off to the side here. We'll do this in a little bit different of a position so you can see how much control I have. Now, that top area, I'm just gonna put that down, so it's not as high off the cutting board. Clean my knife, push this off to the side. We'll go again. Off to the side. Now, what's happening here is my cut product is starting to creep into my work area where I'm looking to cut. So at this point, I can either rearrange and move things around, or I can just grab my bench scraper, which is an amazing tool, one of the most inexpensive and valuable kitchen tools. And I can get these and move them over into my prep container. I've got 2 bowls here, so we'll have room for the other ones. And now I am ready to continue prepping my mushrooms. Anywhere this hand goes, this knife goes. Get these off my cutting board, and now I have a clean area to begin prepping my next ingredient. Now you can use your knife on the side like this and scoop product up, but if you're brand new to knives, get yourself a bench scraper, and then depending on the knife and the style you have, you can start that scooping position once you get more comfortable with your blade. Let's do a quick recap before we proceed to a couple cutting techniques that I really want you to focus on. We understand a couple safety things. Don't try and grab a falling knife, wear some shoes, good to go. Your prep station, you have everything you need ready to go so that you are able to flow with your product, and you have your knife or knives laid out either on your cutting board to the right side or to the left side if you're left-handed, or down on a towel, and you have towels to clean your knives in between use as needed, as well as to clean your surface area here and your dry, clean hands. All right, folks, we're gonna wrap up with 3 cutting techniques that I want you to be familiar with. The very first one is simple. It's just slicing. It is taking your knife and slicing it through a product. It's probably the most natural, and what's also great is you can generally do this without having your hand right up against the product. It just depends on how much you are actually slicing. Discard bowl. So that is slicing. You're generally using more of the tip of the knife like this, or you can use the full body, but if you're going to use the full body, you're gonna go into more of a pushing type of motion, which actually brings us to the push chop. It's kind of like a tap slice hybrid. Tap, think you're going nice and fast like that. A push chop, you come on an angle downward into the product and you push forward like so. Now you may think these are prepped, but we're not done yet, so it's going back over here. Let's do this push chop a little bit more so you can see it. You can see how it's a pushing and slicing type of motion. These I'm going to be done with. I'm going to move them over to the right side. We'll keep going with a little bit of push. So we sliced our pepper to then push chop our pepper into strips, and now we're going to do what's called the rock chop. The rock chop is where the tip of your knife stays on the cutting board at all times. None of this, none of that, none of this. It stays on the cutting board at all times. And then what you do is you move your wrist in a circular type of motion. And I'll do it from a couple different angles here. Think of like a locomotive, rock and roll. It's called the rock chop. So what we're gonna do here is bunch up the product. We're going to keep the tip of the knife on the cutting board, and then we're just going to glide through the peppers. And for the size that I'm doing here, this would be great for, say, a salad. You could even do a really quick saute. The point is, as long as they're even, you're good to go. Now, that rock chop type of motion, you can get a little faster with, is generally the first cutting technique that people are taught. Well, I have a little bit of a problem with it. And the problem is that when people are keeping the tip of the knife on the cutting board and that's it, they tend to get really comfortable and this becomes super easy. But the problem is this is really the only thing you can do with this type of cutting technique. And so what happens is people who are new to knives, they start learning how to use the knife in that way, and it basically makes them fearful of bringing the tip off the cutting board, going into a push or a tap chop type of technique. So what I would encourage you to do is take your time with the push chop first, because it's giving you this feel of coming down and back, kind of similar, right? A little bit similar to that. You're coming down and back. It's similar to slicing. So whether you're doing a push slice or you're doing a pull slice, it has that same type of motion and it gets you used to having the tip of the knife off the cutting board. So you're gonna be a lot more aware of where your blade is going. So in the same type of cut, I have my claw, I have my guide here, and all we're gonna do is come in with this push chop. Watch my left hand. I'm regrouping and moving back. Regrouping, moving back. So if you begin your journey with the push chop technique, it makes things a lot easier. This is slicing. It's the same type of position. You could do it backwards and your knife is off the cutting board. You're getting more used to it. You're not depending on this for every type of cut. Also, the rock chop is fine if you're doing something that's a little bit closer to the cutting board, but when you have an onion to go through, I've seen people trying to small dice an onion like this. I'm telling you, it's actually more dangerous than getting your knife off the cutting board in that push chop position. And when you get comfortable with the push chop and slicing, the rock chop is just gonna come to you like second nature. It's just gonna be super easy. You're not gonna have to think too much about it, and it'll be there for when you need it, but more importantly, the push chop will be there for when you need it, which you're probably gonna use that more often. Now, when you get really comfortable with the push chop, that's where you can go into the tap chop. But take your time getting there. Don't overdo it. Focus on your positioning. Focus on how you're gripping the knife. Focus on how you're holding your guide hand so that you use a lot less Band-Aids. All right, folks, that wraps it up. I'm feeling good. I feel like you are now in control so that when you do start learning the various cutting techniques and working with different ingredients, that you can do so with confidence and control. I'm Chef Brandon with Cutlery and More. Thanks for tuning in.